So welcome to Cooking Fun with Joanna. And I am Joanna, your host with Nutrition in Motion. I am a holistic nutritionist and a inflammation expert. And tonight we are going to be making a sweet potato and exotic, I don't know about exotic vegetables, but exotic vegetable coconut curry. So it's actually one of the things that I like to do is I help people actually cook and learn how to cook and teach them how to cook, because cooking is actually a fun thing to do. It's a way to actually tap into your creativity, and it's nourishing, much more nourishing to actually make your own food than just to always go out and order out or order in. So tonight we're going to do a vegetarian dish. So originally this was going to be a beef one, but I decided, you know what, we could change this. So it's going to be completely all vegetables. So I'm going to be doing one sweet potato, and we're going to cut that up into quarter-inch cubes. I've got a couple of these yellow zucchini because I thought they'd be more fun than anything else. We're going to be making it with mushrooms, and I have both portabella and shiitake mushrooms, just because I think you need I think a variety would be fun. I'm adding a little bit of turmeric into mine for the anti-inflammatory properties. Then there's a nice big onion that we're going to chop up. We're going to put some anti-inflammatory cauliflower too, because the cauliflower has some of those indole-3-carbinol and some other properties that actually help to lower estrogen levels and help the body to detoxify. And then we're also adding in some kale and chard near the end, because adding greens always adds antioxidants, a little extra protein, and a lot of good minerals. Then we're going to use vegetable broth, but I'm also going to use my own bone broth that I made. So yes, I've just reused a bottle from kombucha just because it's this great almighty bottle, but I'm going to use my bone broth, my chicken bone broth for this particular recipe. And then last but not least, coconut milk, coriander as a spice, and cumin. Wait, I think there's supposed to be curry in here too. How could it be a curry recipe without curry? So
Curry powder in it.
Curry powder.
It's right there.
I have curry powder. I knew there was something missing when I was doing this. So those are all the ingredients: a sweet potato, mushrooms, cauliflower, coconut milk, onion, garlic, and yes, we are going to put the garlic in this time. The kale, and then cumin, coriander, and curry. Got it? Yep. So we're gonna just chop things up and gonna put it into, I've got this, I don't know if it's a six quart pot, because I gotta fit all those vegetables in it. And we're not gonna do this over rice because we're putting the sweet potato in. So that'll be your carbohydrate for the meal. So if you've got the gas stove, you can turn that on, or if you have the electric stove, you definitely have to turn it on. But we're gonna chop the onion first, and we're gonna chop the sweet potato first. But you can go ahead and turn on that pot. You'll want to use a big butcher knife. And I'm going to do some demonstration here. So I'm going to move the camera so that you can see what I am doing. So we're going to, you can peel the potato if you want. I am usually too lazy. Plus there's a lot of nutrients that are in the skin. So I tend to leave the skin on. But if you want to go ahead and peel it, you can. I'm going to chop off the ends. And this is why you need a big butcher knife, because you got to really step into it to cut the sweet potato. And you're going to cut them into, I don't know, are these 1/2-inch wedges? Basically 1/2-inch wedge slices. And then we're going to dice them too. And just be careful when you get closer to the end, because you might not be able to cut that last one in half. All right, got it all done. Then you're gonna take 2 at a time. You're gonna cut it in half. So you're gonna cut those slices in half and then turn it sideways and cut it into either 3 or 4 pieces, depending on how big the slices are. So now what I want you to do is put some olive oil into that pot. So you're gonna put probably 2 tablespoons in. I'm also gonna put in a little bit of ghee because that gives it a little bit more buttery flavor and it can withstand the higher heat. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna caramelize all the vegetables first. So they're gonna be on a higher heat, but we're gonna leave them in there and not stir them so that they will caramelize, so that the sugar comes out and they actually start to brown. I'm just gonna keep going and taking each 2 slices, cutting it in half, turning it, and then cutting it into 3 so that you have these 1/2 inch, or they're kind of 1/2 inch cubes, but they're not quite cubes. And you're just gonna lay them into that pot.
Are you putting any like butter or anything in the pot?
I put some ghee into it. So yes, I put a little bit of butter with it. So I'm basically 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 1 teaspoon, or 2 teaspoons of olive oil and 1 teaspoon of butter or ghee, whichever you have.
Yeah, both.
And in my case, I have to actually kind of turn the vegetables around so that the oil is all across the whole pan. So now we're going to chop up the onion. I was hesitating there because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the onion first or the mushrooms. But we're gonna end up doing this whole mushroom and we're gonna dice that as well. So you'll cut off the end and then peel off that outer layer and try to get that, it's almost like the invisible sheath. You wanna get that invisible sheath off. And if you're coordinated like me, you're going to cut that onion kind of halfway. Then you're going to use the end of the knife, and if it's not sharp enough, then you'll have to sharpen it. But you're going to cut stripes into the onion. Get rid of all the extra skins. And then basically you're doing 1/4 inch dices. So this is not going to be that fine. It's going to be more coarse than what we've done in the past. And you're just going to put that right into the pot. And things, you should start hearing it sizzle. And if you find an extra, oh, that's a sweet potato. We'll put that back in. And then you're going to go ahead and do the same thing with the other half of the onion. My onion just keeps tearing instead of peeling off. There it goes. I'm going to put that over on the side and recycle that later. And then I'm going to cut it 2/3 of the way in half. I'm going to actually sharpen my knife a little bit, including the end. You're going to hold on to that onion, keep that tail on, and then just slice down with the end of the tip of the knife, and then use the main base and chop it into 1/4 inch diced onions. And then pour that right into the pot as well. And if it falls all around the pot, that's okay too. Just pick it up and put it in. I'm assuming you washed your hands. And you can go ahead and mix it a little bit if you want. or you can just leave it because we want those potatoes to cook. And I just found one piece that's quite large, so I'm gonna cut that in half. All right, so now we're gonna do the portobello mushrooms. Those hopefully will let out some water and some liquid, and then it'll vaporize. I got some of the smaller ones, but you're gonna make these into 1/2-inch cubes. You're gonna cut depending on the size of your mushroom, I'm basically cutting this one into 1/2-inch slices, then turning it to the side, using the main part of the knife and making these kind of 1/2-inch rectangles. Does that make sense? So it's gonna look like that. And just add that in. And because these are fresh mushrooms, I don't have to cut this mushroom cap off. And it might even be easier if you put the mushroom on its cap to be able to slice. And you slice it one way, turn it the other way, and then cut it into cubes. You can use the whole knife to scoop it up in your hand and dump it in. So I'm gonna put in 3 of these medium portobello mushrooms. And I'm actually going to turn the heat up just a teeny tiny bit. And I will show you. So I've got mine on, it's still on medium heat, but it's going to be still pretty hot that way. But you want it at least on the medium heat, but not necessarily on high. Okay? So that's done with the portobello mushrooms. Now I'm gonna do the shiitake mushrooms and do the same thing. Slice them up. I think I'm gonna put these into slices instead of dicing it. But these you'll wanna cut the stem off. And I'm just gonna cut them into 1/4-inch slices and put them into the pot. So then when I'm actually eating them, then I'll know the difference between one versus the other, just by what they look like. And I'm probably gonna just use, so far I've got 3. I'm gonna do 6 of these. Next, we're gonna actually put salt into that so that the mushrooms let out their juices a little bit quicker. And then we're gonna chop up the cauliflower. I'm gonna do one of the yellow zucchinis. And then we're just going to kind of, wouldn't say wait, but we kind of have to wait.
You said we're doing a little bit of salt now?
Putting the salt in now, yeah, and you're only putting in about 1/4 teaspoon in there, maybe 1/2 at the most. So you're gonna put the salt in there now, mostly on the mushrooms, so that they start kind of releasing their juices and so they can get caramelized. So I am going to go ahead and that's really good of me, right? I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna actually stir the pot, but I'm gonna bring you over so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm just gonna stir everything. And then we're just gonna let it sit here for another few minutes.
And that's what my pot looks like.
And I like to just rest the wooden spoon on the edge, but you could also put it on, rest it on something else so that it doesn't get heated up while you're cooking. Okay?
Yep.
So now we're going to, I think the cauliflower is probably going to take longer than the zucchini, the yellow squash. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm probably going to just use a quarter of a head as opposed to half a head. I'm just looking at how much room I have in my pot, and I don't know if I could fit both the cauliflower and the squash and the liquid. So I'm just going to take this head and move it over so that I don't have to look at it. And then you're going to cut that the center part out and put the cauliflower on its side, kind of, sort of, and you're just going to slice it into 1/2-inch cubes. So you're gonna cut it into stripes first, into 1/2-inch stripes, and then cut it into cubes. And then we have to still cut the cubes into smaller cubes because they're not actually cubes. You following me?
Yep.
Then you're just going to take these and put them on their side, which is why you want that sharper knife, because it makes it easier. But make sure you don't get your finger in the middle of it so that you don't end up bleeding, because blood in your food is probably not really a good idea. Can't tell you if it tastes good or not, but it's probably just not a good idea. All right, so I'm going to take this cauliflower and just slide it into the pot. Then we're going to, I'm going to actually do a little bit of turmeric into mine. So I'm just going to kind of cut it into teeny cubes and just put it in and do it kind of roughly, because once this all softens, it should be fine. All right, so that's in there. Now we're going to do the garlic. It's 2 garlic cloves. So you're going to cut the end off, or the base part off. And I can still do this with a big knife, but you want to start peeling off the outer skin. And my garlic skin is wanting to stay on. All right, so that's off. Now I'm going to do the other one. And you might actually find it easier to pull the tail off and pull it down. Sometimes that helps. In this case, it didn't for me. And there, now I've got all the skin off. And we're just going to cut it once down the middle and then just cut it into thin slices. So you're not going to dice it, you're just going to slice it. And then this one is pretty big too, so I'm going to cut it down the middle and then just slice it into small slices. And this is why you want a really sharp knife, because if your knife is dull, this part is really hard to do. Then I'm going to take this garlic and put that into the pot. And the edge of the pot works really nicely. You can slide the knife across it and it cleans the knife off from all those vegetables that you were cutting. Now, are you doing the zucchini or squash?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to dice this one. I was going to make it into matchsticks, but that's not going to work.
Well, Judy's already got it cut into matchsticks.
All right, well, that's fine. Matchsticks work too. But I was thinking matchsticks might be still too big. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna make smaller matchsticks.
I can always cut these in half.
So they're gonna be 1-inch matchsticks.
That's not what she has.
All right. So she and I are thinking the same way.
That's scary.
Well, maybe we've just been cooking together for a long time, so
True.
she's thinking ahead. But yeah, we're gonna cut these into 1-inch matchsticks. And I think the easiest way to do it is cut that zucchini in half, then cut it into 1 inch, and then cut that, slice it in half, and then slice it into the sticks. Before I put this last half of the zucchini in, I'm gonna stir everything. And for me, my mushrooms are starting to cook down.
Yes, they're ours.
They're starting to shrivel. I'll show you what it looks like so that you can see what we're doing. I'm not getting that caramelized part, so I think I'm gonna turn the heat up a teeny bit. And maybe that'll get it caramelized, because I want some of that caramelized flavor to come through. Once we add the liquids, you're not going to be able to caramelize it. So that's what it looks like right now. And I'm going to go ahead and come back to chopping the last squash. And I do find that it's easier to actually cut it when it's on its side, as opposed to laying down. So if you're at home doing this, you might find the same thing. So all right, so we have that done. I'm gonna move this over. We're gonna save this for a little bit later because we don't need it quite yet. But I'm going to move you over so that you can see what I'm doing over here a little bit better. And now what we're gonna do is put the spices in, okay?
Okay.
So it's gonna be half a teaspoon of ground pepper. And I guess you can eyeball it if you're like me and you're using a pepper mill. So you're just gonna put pepper in. And then about half a teaspoon. I can hear mine sizzling a little bit better now that I turned up the heat a bit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and actually turn it just to see what it's doing. Not caramelizing yet, so I'm gonna leave it there for 5 minutes. Then it's 1 teaspoon of ground cumin. I'm just gonna take my lid off because it's so much easier to do it that way. And I like cumin, so if I go over, I'm gonna be okay with having too much. I'm gonna do 1 teaspoon. And my cumin is nearing its end, and it's being stubborn at the bottom. So I'm gonna take a knife and get it unstuck. All right, I'm just gonna empty that bottle. So that's the cumin. Then you're gonna do 1 tablespoon of curry powder. So that'll be 3 teaspoons of curry powder. That's 1, 2, 3 teaspoons. And then 1/2 teaspoon of the coriander powder. Oops. I went over on that one too. I did a heaping teaspoon.
How much of the coriander?
Pardon me?
How much of the coriander?
1/2 teaspoon. I put a whole teaspoon in.
Oh,
Oops, but I like coriander, so. All right, so we're just gonna leave that as is. And we're gonna go ahead and open up the coconut milk. Not that you need a lesson on how to open a can of coconut milk, but we're gonna be using the whole can of coconut milk.
You okay with that? The whole can?
It's gonna be, yes, the whole can. But we're gonna go ahead and put in 1 cup of the broth. I need to get my measuring cup. And I'm gonna actually test to see if we're not gonna put anything in yet because I want these potatoes to soften up. So I'm gonna stir all of this. And now my vegetables are browning on the bottom. But I want the potatoes to cook a little bit more so that they are, otherwise it'll take, 20 minutes longer to cook if we don't cook them now. Does that make sense? It smells really good.
Yeah, it does smell really good.
Like if you didn't want to add the broth or anything else, you could just leave this and keep cooking it and just eat this as a dish.
Yeah.
Because this smells really, really good just as it is.
Especially when you walk in the other room and you come back in, it's like, it smells so good.
Yeah, that's what, sometimes I do that on purpose. I would leave the house and then come back in. Yeah, my potatoes are gonna take a while. But that's why I wanted to start putting them in first, because they tend to take the longest. Some of them are halfway done, so that's good. And some of them are actually done, so. But we can at least measure the broth. And like I said, I make my own bone broth from chicken bones. So I can get the maximum amount of the collagen out of it, and it feeds my good bacteria. It feeds my gut. It feeds the intestinal wall lining so that I have a healthier gut. So I'm just going to use my own concoction rather than store-bought. But store-bought will be fine. And then you're going to pour in at 1 to 1.5 cups of broth. I'm just gonna put the rest of that in there because it's enough. And you're gonna bring this to boil. And now we're just gonna let it simmer for a little bit. It should probably take about 7 minutes, maybe 10. But this is where you might want to turn the heat up a little bit so that it actually boils a little faster. And if you want, you can just add the coconut milk into it at the same time. And this is what makes it nice and creamy, but without having the dairy. So this is what mine looks like right now. Before I stir it, it's kind of cool looking. But it looks like I poured white paint into my soup. So I'm just gonna stir it all together and the color should change. And that looks much better. So now we're just gonna leave it there, but we're gonna put a cover on it so that it cooks a little bit more completely. And I'm just going to reach down and get my lid. Where is my lid? If you were my lid, where would you go? Oh, it's in the rack where I have all my lids. And then in a few minutes, we're gonna go ahead and well, we could chop this up now, but you're gonna take basically a cup of the kale or spinach. And I got the baby greens. And I'm just going to chop that up into, I'm basically just gonna chop it up. So that way it'll be like minced greens. And we're gonna add that in about 7 minutes. I'm just gonna take a big handful of it and just try to scrunch it together with my hand. And again, this is why you want that sharp knife, because then you can kind of chop it up. And you're just gonna cut it into these 1/2-inch strips, so to speak, and the lettuce should be chopped. If you want it chopped even smaller, then you can turn the cutting board and cut it some more so then it's chopped. Okay?
Yep.
So it's your choice. There's no right or wrong. But we're gonna add that in near the end because it should take only like 3 minutes for this to cook. But I'm gonna take another handful and chop that up too. But not quite as big of a handful. And one wants to get away. So move that over, turn the cutting board, chop it some more.
Yeah.
And now I'm gonna check to see if my potato is cooked. And if some of the other vegetables are cooked. So right now this is not that hot, so I'm gonna just use my hand. So you're gonna take a ladle and pull out. Come on. Just a couple of items and see how cooked they are. There. And I have basically one of everything. Now mine is boiling. How's yours?
Yeah, it's boiling.
Okay. So I'm
Cauliflower.
just gonna try this to see if it's even cooked. And you can see my potato is not quite cooked. So I know that that's not ready. The cauliflower is getting there. The mushroom getting there. And then there's zucchini. Zucchini is pretty much done. So I'm gonna go ahead and Throw that back in the pot. Let it continue cooking. And now, since I've actually tried it, we do actually have to add a little bit more salt into it. Okay? But I wouldn't add the salt until you've actually tried it. But since I've tried it, I know mine needs a little bit of salt. And I got this new pepper, or it's a salt mill. So it's actually hard to see how much you're putting in, but I'm gonna guesstimate. I can always add more, but I can't take it out. But we're gonna cook this for another couple minutes and just let it simmer. And just take in all that extra scent. Leave the kitchen and then come back and then you'll know how good it really smells, right? This is, you know, now when you're waiting for the, for everything to cook, the one thing that you can do is start, you know, okay, I'm gonna put the lid back on the kale so I can put it back in the refrigerator. I'm gonna put the plastic back on the mushrooms because you might as well start putting some things away even while you're cooking. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put that plastic back on the shiitake mushrooms. And if you just, when you make this again, if you decide you want more mushrooms, you can always add more mushrooms. If you decide you want different vegetables, you can. And depending on how big of a pot you're using, you might even want to increase the amount of vegetables that you put in and the amount of spices that you put in. So that was what, 2 minutes now?
Something like that.
So I don't know if 2 minutes is long enough to see. And now my lid is getting a little too warm, so I'm gonna use I'm gonna turn mine down just a tad bit because mine's really boiling furiously. And I'm not sure I want it to be furiously boiling, but I'm gonna stab my fork in here to see how the potatoes are doing. And the potatoes are almost done. They have another minute or two. So now would be a perfect time to put the spinach into the pot. Or the kale, or whatever you use. I've got the spinach, the baby spinach, kale, and chard blend. And I just find that to be less bitter, a lot more sweet, and a lot more tender. So I tend to use that in cooking more so than just the regular kale. Unless, of course, the kale comes from somebody's garden, and that kale is going to be fresh and tender no matter what, and it's never bitter. So you just want to mix that in. Bring you over again. You just want to mix that in. And we're just going to cover it and let that simmer for another 2 to 3 minutes. And then this whole thing will be ready.
Okie dokie.
Okie dokie, pretty simple, huh?
Not bad.
Actually, very easy.
And actually, you don't even taste the coconut.
No, that's the good part about the coconut. It doesn't really, the coconut milk doesn't taste like coconut. If you use coconut water, you might get that coconut flavor, but that's the beauty of coconut milk. They use it quite a bit in Indian cooking. And typically curry is an Indian thing too. So it's a way to get your creaminess without using cow's milk. So if you ever see a vegetarian recipe, a lot of times that's what they'll be using is the coconut milk instead of the dairy. And now you can buy anything with coconut milk. You can buy coconut yogurt. I think there's even coconut cream cheese. There's coconut ricotta. And because somebody wanted to make lasagna. So we found Kite Hill is a brand, Kite, and then Hill, Hill, and they make a yogurt that I think is really good and actually not sweet, and it's good texture. And same thing, they actually make a Kite Hill ricotta. So if you want to make your own vegetable lasagna and vegetarian, then that's the way you can get the cheese in without getting the
Okay.
dairy. Yeah. Haven't tried it yet, but I saw that it's available. I don't do lasagna, so then that becomes the challenge. All right, so does everybody have their bowl ready?
Yes.
So that whole thing took like what, 40 minutes? I think
Yeah.
from when we started. So I think, and even cutting the vegetables really wasn't that bad. At least I didn't think it was.
Yeah, I did them ahead, but it really didn't take me that long.
Yeah, and I think because the mushrooms are not that hard to chop. Like if you had to do, a whole bunch of sweet potatoes, I think you'd be like, I'm done with this after 2. So I'm gonna turn mine off. I'm gonna grab my bowl, grab my glove, because the lids always get hot. No matter how hard you try not to get them hot, they get hot. Ooh, this looks really good. And if you really wanted, you could also put this over, like put it over a bed of rice. But I'm gonna eat it just like this. And I'm gonna let it cool off, because when it comes straight out of the pot, it's going to be hot. And the last thing we want to do, is burn our mouths, right? That would be one way to keep yourself from eating, is burn your mouth. But that's not really what I would recommend. So I'm gonna just show you what my pot looks like so that you can see what the whole pot, when it's cooked, what it looks like. You could cook it a little bit longer if you wanted to make it thinner, or put a little bit of potato starch to thicken it up if you wanted it more of a thick sauce instead of more like a soup. But this is definitely more like a soup, and that's how it's supposed to be intended. And I think I need a spoon. No, that's a fork. Spoon. So it smells really good. I'm gonna take some of the, it's still really, really hot. I mean, that's the good thing about cooking, is that it's really, really hot. But that's the best thing when you want to eat, that it's really, really hot. This is good. And I can imagine this is even better. It's going to be even better tomorrow. So how's yours look?
Looks good.
Good. Let's see.
Oh, yum. Delicious. So, ow. My dish is actually hot now, so I can't hold on to it, except for on the very edges. Did you try it yet?
Just about to.
I'm gonna dig in now.
Very good. I might even add, I don't know if it really needs anything. I'm gonna try a teeny bit more salt on mine, just to see if that does anything. Just on that one spoonful. It's hot.
No, it's good.
It's really, really good.
That is really good.
So very easy, very nutritious. It's anti-inflammatory. You won't get any extra aches and pains from eating it. You shouldn't be getting any kind of stomach aches from it either, just because it doesn't have any ingredients in it that will upset the stomach. So that is a fabulous meal. And it only takes 40 minutes, which is even better. And
Yes,
then,
it's great.
pardon me?
I said, which is great. So
Yeah, and if you wanted to add any kind of protein into it, let's say you wanted to make it with some kind of beef or chicken, you could just put that in at the beginning and then brown it. And you can either, and then take it out, put the vegetables in, and
Right.
then add the meat back in when you put the, when you put the sauces in.
I think it would taste good with chicken.
I think it would taste good with chicken or with beef, either one. But I like it just as it is. And it's kind of nice to have just vegetables once in a while
Sure.
too. And the root vegetable, the sweet potato is nice and grounding too. So I just like the combination, and the textures are a little bit different. So in 2 weeks, we're gonna make a tamarind chicken with Parmesan, rosemary, zucchini fries.
Nice.
oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, I thought it sounded good too. So that's what we're gonna make. And I'm sure at that time, zucchini is still gonna be like plentiful. And you know, all you gotta do is find your gardening friends and they'll have zucchini still growing. And so
I was
that's
gonna say
gonna be
they'll have
something we can
zucchinis
make.
they'll be wanting to get rid of.
Exactly. So, you know, and there'll be plenty of them at the farmers markets too. So
Yeah.
in 2 weeks, we're doing tamarind chicken with, what did I say?
Parmesan fries.
Parmesan, rosemary, zucchini fries. So that's going to be on August 10th. That'll be my first class as a U.S. citizen. Right now, I'm still just permanent resident. So that'll be fun and exciting. So thank you for joining me for Cooking Fun with Joanna. If you have any questions or want to show us how yours looks, go ahead and post the comments below and join us again for Cooking Fun with Joanna. You can contact me at www.nutritioninmotion.net and give me some suggestions of what it is that you'd like to see in the future, or just join in so that you can find out when our other classes are. Bon appetit.